you. Thank you. Thank you. It is so wonderful to be here. For me, this is a season of hope. As I look ahead, I am strengthened by family and friendship. So many of you have been with me in the happiest days and the hardest days. For you and for me, the work begins anew. The hope rises again, and the dream lives on. Thank you, thank you.
My fondest of memories were growing up on Cape Cod. From my earliest beginnings, our house has been the scrapbook for our family. All of the really major times of joy and triumph, and some of sadness and disappointment, have been a part of these pictures. I've grown up in a large family as the 9th member of that family. The relationship between brothers and sisters was extremely close. All during the 30s and 40s, my father was one that sort of challenged all the members of the family. He could spot when you were not really measuring up, or not giving your all.
America's new ambassador to Britain, Joseph P. Kennedy, on his arrival in Plymouth.
When my father's ambassadorship was announced, it was just an extraordinary, exciting experience, even for a very young member of the family, almost 6 years old.
Excited? Why, Edward's speechless.
One of the most outstanding memories is the trip over to London. I can remember having a very warm sense of the feeling that people in Great Britain had for the members of the family.
Master Teddy Kennedy cut the tape which gave to the non-grown-up public its own small section of the animal kingdom.
I remember going to the opening of the London Zoo. This was really a wonderful, wonderful zoo. I remember Gibbs School. It was one of the first times that I had fisticuffs with someone in my class. He was sort of a bully, and I remember coming home and asking my father whether I was the ambassador's son and could I really fight back, and he said, go to it. And so the next day we went right at it. We had no thought at that time of the potential dangers of war. I had been sent home when the bombing really intensified in London. My father was a wonderful letter writer. He wrote me a letter about the bombing and about how it was destroying people's lives, and how he hoped that when I grew up that, you could work to try and avoid conflict and war. My brother Joe sort of took me under his wing. He was 17 years older than I was. He's still the earliest memory of sort of an older figure.
He had been a great hero of mine.
He was the one that taught me to swim. He was the one that taught me to sail on Cape Cod, the love of the sea. And he always seemed to be available to spend time with. He volunteered for the war, December 8th.
In this house, I heard that my brother Joe was lost.
It was on a summer day, mid-August, and I can remember, even though I was very young at that time, the priest came in and talked to my parents, and then they came down and visited with us. A devastating blow to both of my parents. My sister Kathleen had volunteered for the Red Cross a year earlier because of her real outrage of the war.
Kathleen was lost just after the war.
Just a day doesn't go by where I'm not thoughtful about them and don't miss them. I mean, I do in a very, very real way.
People have a lot of challenges, a lot of heartache during the course of their lives, and still try and reach out and help other people, and that's sort of a central kind of a theme in terms of our development. From the days of high school, I always wanted to run for office.
I would say probably in college I really became most interested in politics.
There's no stopping Sahura, who clicks with a touchdown ball that's deflected to end Ted Kennedy, brother of Massachusetts Senator John Kennedy.
All of us played sports. In our family, all the boys and girls were all really treated very equally. There was the strong sort of pecking order. I mean, people understood that. Of course, being the youngest member of the family, made perhaps more conscious of that. They always take some ribbing being the youngest anyway. They said that I didn't wait in line.
I thought Ted might grow up and be a priest or even a bishop. But he met a beautiful blonde one night, and so that was the end of my ambition in that direction.
Joan and I were married on the 29th of November.
I was 4 years old, and I think Ted was 8. And we lived 2 blocks apart, and we never met until I was in college.
For my lawful wife.
For my lawful wife. This was obviously one of the great happy moments. It seemed that everything was coming up roses. And I sort of entered the political process, helping my brother in the 60s.
Senator John Kennedy of Massachusetts, Democrat, throws his hat in the presidential ring.
My brother Bob managed the presidential campaign.
And I had responsibility for the western states.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. I loved that part of the country. I've been traveling around with Jack, and we're hopeful and confident the people here in Oregon are going to give Jack an overwhelming and enthusiastic endorsement here on next Friday, also next November. Thank you very much.
We are taking on really some of the most powerful figures in the Democratic Party. Lyndon Johnson at his strongest.
First to be placed in nomination is Senator Lyndon B. Johnson of Texas. Now Minnesota's Governor Orville Freeman places in nomination
the great senator from the state of Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy.
Senator John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 43-year-old Massachusetts senator.
Pennsylvania.
It was so interesting. By the time we got to Wyoming only had 15 votes, and we had 10.5 votes out of the 15 votes. And my brother Bob asked me to speak to the chairman, and the chairman said, "You must be crazy. Are you saying to me that you think it'll be in that 4 vote? That'll make really the difference? Your brother getting a nomination?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "If it comes to those 4, you've got them. I'll take them right away from Lyndon Johnson. You've got them." Came down to that.
Mr. Chairman, Wyoming's vote will make majority for Senator Kennedy.
Really, just to say extraordinary is not adequate, obviously, to describe the emotion. It was just euphoric. After my brother got the nomination, it was that kind of reaching out to people of all beliefs that was very much a part of his campaign. We'd all been a part of the journey of the campaign, spent a lot of time in it. So we had a sense that we were going to win, but at least at that time, we probably didn't know how difficult it was going to be.
We were all down there for the election night. There was euphoria in the early part of the evening, and then some of the other results came in.
It stayed very close throughout.
We began to wonder exactly what the outcome was going to be.
Popular vote majority. 1:45 in the morning on the basis of the returns
Until we know. It was a very, very close campaign, and the kind of bond and trust that was built during that period of time was incredibly important.
At 7:19 a.m. Eastern Time, the NBC Victory Desk has just given California to Kennedy, and that gives him the election.
In the morning, it was very definite that he had won the presidency. The morning after the election, it's one of those moments that seems like just yesterday. Everyone just sat down where it was natural to them, and I think the one thing when they were just having the picture taken was just to make sure that my brother Jack, the president-elect, was going to be in the middle.
I really didn't think about running for the United States Senate, certainly during the course of the election. But after the election, I returned to Massachusetts as assistant district attorney, and my brother Bob, who I thought would probably run up there, had been nominated for Attorney General. And so I began to think about it. I realized what a challenge it would be, what an honor it would be. And my brother, the president, said, "Well, Teddy, why don't you get around the state? I've got a good enough antenna up there, and I'll start hearing how you're doing." And he began to get at least a sense or a feeling that, perhaps I was up to it.
My brothers really thought that politics was an honorable profession.
Well, my father's always stressed the fact that he did very well in this country, and that we as children coming along have an obligation to meet to the United States, and he always stressed the fact that we should take part in government and go into politics.
My father felt that Teddy had worked all this time during the campaign and sacrificed himself for his older brother, and we had our positions, and so that he should have the right to run, and I was pleased that he was running, and I think the president was pleased.
My father always said that home holds no fear, so as we got older and involved in political life, he always felt that we ought to do what was right, and we could always come home and be assured of the kind of support that we'd always received when we grew up.
He always said, you do the best that you can, and after that, the devil with it.
Our guest today is Edward M. Kennedy, the president's youngest brother, who is expected soon to announce his candidacy for the Democratic nomination as United States Senator from Massachusetts.
I came down from Boston to be on Meet the Press, and I went over to the White House and went into the Oval Office. My brother said, Teddy, are you ready? And I said, well, I think so. And he said, well, why don't you sit in the chair over there? And he said, let me ask you a few questions. Of course, he always knew the tough questions because he'd been asked all of those. And I had planned to go out to have some dinner with some friends. He said, you better start going right back and prepare some more.
Why didn't you do as your brother John did and run for a congressional seat rather than for a top seat?
You're an assistant district attorney now. Why not district attorney?
All of this sounds very much as though you're about to announce.
Your brother is the president of the United States. You have another brother who is the attorney general. You have a brother-in-law who is head of the Peace Corps. And you have a brother-in-law, Steve Smith, who until recently was with the State Department, I believe. I wonder if you could tell us how you feel about the presence of a family, such as yours, occupying that number of key positions in American life.
Well, Mr. Clerman, if you're talking about too many Kennedys, you should have talked to my mother and father at the time when they were getting started.
I'm announcing today my candidacy for the Senate of the United States. I make this decision in the full knowledge of the obstacles I will face, the charges that will be made, and the heavy responsibilities of the office.
Yeah, nice to see you. How are you?
Mr. Kennedy, what is your ultimate goal in public life? Do you hope or intend someday perhaps to run for president?
Having seen the problems of my brother, I just wonder whether seeking that job is really worth it.
Mr. President, your brother Ted recently on television said that after seeing the cares of office on you, that he wasn't sure he'd ever be interested in being the president. I wonder if you could tell us whether, if you had it to do over again, you would work for the presidency, and whether you can recommend the job to others.
Well, the answer is, the first is yes, and the second is no. I don't recommend it to others. At least for a while.
From the auditorium of South Boston High School, candidates for the Democratic nomination as United States Senator from Massachusetts in this primary election. Edward M. Kennedy and Edward J. McCormick, Jr.
If his name was Edward Moore, with his qualifications, with your qualifications, Teddy, if it was Edward Moore, your candidacy would be a joke. But nobody's laughing. Nobody's laughing. And nobody's laughing because his name is not Edward Moore. It's Edward Moore Kennedy.
It was full court press by Eddie McCormick. It was really quite baptism of fire.
You are not running on qualifications. You are running on a slogan. You can do more for Massachusetts. This is the most insulting slogan I have seen in Massachusetts politics, because this slogan means vote for this man because he has influence, he has connections, he has relations.
We should not have any talk about personalities or families. I feel that we should be talking about the people's destiny in Massachusetts.
We've got a little bit of time left over, and Mr. Kennedy has been very restrained in his comment on this last question. Would you like to add a word or two, Mr. Kennedy?
We've agreed by the standards which this should be conducted.
Very
I'm satisfied.
good. Thank you very much.
Sono contento de stare mensa voi questa sera. I am delighted to be here in the north end of Boston, where my grandfather was born, and he said that he received such a wonderful reception that it seemed like the cobblestones of the north end rose up to welcome him home.
In the battle of family names in Massachusetts primary election, 35-year-old George Cabot Lodge and Mrs. Lodge arrive at the polls. He wins Republican nomination to the Senate seat once held by his father and grandfather. A more hotly contended race is that of Edward M. Kennedy, the president's 30-year-old brother. President and Mrs. Kennedy arrived from their brief holiday in Newport, Rhode Island, to add their votes for the younger Kennedy, who was an easy winner. This primary commands national interest as a test of the magic of the Kennedy name, a magic that will be tested again come November.
I will introduce myself. I am Teddy Kennedy's brother, and I'm glad to be here.
Scene 3, take 1. Coffee with Kennedy's at Hyannisport.
Is someone supposed to come in here? Good morning. So glad to see you all again, and welcome to Hyannisport. We thought today that instead of talking about the issues of the campaign, we would talk a little bit about the house here and its surroundings and the way that Teddy was brought up. Oh, here's Joe. Sarah, how are you, dear? Have you got your book to read to Grandma this morning? Oh, that's wonderful. And Eddie, how are you with your red cheeks? Have you got your book, dear? Oh, look. Look at that big bunny. And he's got little blue trousers on, just like Eddie wears some days. Yes. Right? Are you going to patty cake for us? You can patty cake. I do want to tell the women in this audience today that I hope they are going to vote for Ted, and I hope the women will get out and vote, because the only time that a member of our family lost a fight against the Lodges was when my father ran against Mr. Lodge in 1916. Of course, my father was Teddy's grandfather, and Henry Cabot Lodge was the great-grandfather, I believe, of George Lodge, Teddy's competitor.
Hey, Massachusetts, Ted fills the bill, and one vote from you sets Kennedy on the hill. A young, strong, and able, fair-minded man. He's ready and willing to fight for you as no other candidate can. So what do you say, mighty Bay State? Let's take a stand. Go all the way, state Kennedy by demand. If you want to be sure that your voice is heard beyond election day, vote correct, elect
Ted Kennedy, as he is nicknamed, has won the seat that was once held by his brother, President John F. Kennedy.
I was greatly honored to win and honored to follow in a tradition. I never take it for granted.
I'm grateful to the people of Massachusetts for the great trust which they've bestowed upon me. I pledge that I shall dedicate all of my strength and will to serving you in the United States Senate. This afternoon, I was over at the White House to talk about some of the ideas for the State of the Union. And all I heard from him was, "Are you still using that greasy kid stuff on your hair?"
A Boston office has been opened for the newest and youngest member of the Kennedy family to be sent to Washington.
Senator Kennedy, where on the scale between extremely conservative and ultra-liberal would you place yourself?
Well, I certainly consider myself a liberal.
When you arrived in the Senate, how were you received?
Very well. The members of the Senate were extremely kind and hospitable to me, extremely helpful. And I've only made one speech, and that's been a major speech, and that was on the question of civil rights.
I have seen what discrimination at home does to us. This is not a political issue. It is a moral issue.
I was very conscious that that whole move to strike down the barriers of race was perhaps the most difficult crisis that the country has come to grips with. And the president wanted to make the progress in civil rights, recognize the moment in terms of American history. So it was a very emotional time with the lunch counter sit-ins, the dogs biting at students, with George Wallace in the schoolhouse door, with calling out the National Guard in the southern states.
Go home, Mayor. Go home, Mayor.
And it was a time when There really had to be a strong presidential leadership.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution.
President Kennedy was the one that called it the greatest moral issue that we faced, the first president to do so. And I think that really goes back to the time of my mother's sort of teaching and the lessons that she was able to give to us in terms of the discrimination against the Irish in Boston, which made a very powerful impression upon her. She was there when it was such an issue at the time, my grandfather's time. And this, I think, made a very powerful impact on both of my brothers and the great challenges that we faced on the discrimination and the civil rights.
Mr. President, now it seems unlikely that you will get a civil rights bill in this session of Congress. Does that disturb you?
Oh, I think that the longer they're delayed, I think that, I think it is unfortunate. And I'm hopeful that the House will certainly act on that in the next month, maybe sooner.
The scene in Washington this morning, thousands and thousands of people streaming through the Capitol Rotunda to pay their last respects to President Kennedy.
Three members of the family, Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy in the center, and the two Kennedy brothers who served the United States, Ted Kennedy, Senator, United States Senator from Massachusetts, on her left, and on her right, the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy.
I'm sure that people watching would like to hear from you how Mrs. Jackie Kennedy and the two small children are getting along.
Well, they have their good days and their difficult days. John, the young boy, is extremely vigorous and interested in everything, and Caroline gets along quite well.
They have an understanding of what happened, do they?
Well, I imagine as much as children can have.
His life and death had a meaning. It was that we should not hate but love one another. No memorial oration or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought so long. It is in this spirit that I hope the Senate will pass this bill.
We interrupt to bring you this bulletin. A plane carrying Senator Edward M. Kennedy to the Massachusetts Democratic Convention reportedly crashed tonight. Kennedy is reported seriously injured. There were two other occupants of the plane, and they are trapped in the wreckage.
We don't know at this point whether Senator Birch Bayh was with him or not. The two senators stayed in Washington to vote on the Civil Rights Bill late this afternoon.
I felt a tremendous impact of the crash. I was conscious of sort of sliding along the ground very briefly, and there was complete silence. And Senator Bayh
called my name a few times, and I could hear him, but I really couldn't respond.
And I went back to the window and leaned in and yelled at him again, and this time he sort of mumbled and got hold of him.
And he pulled me out of the plane, and my legs just fell onto the ground.
Doctor said today he's not paralyzed, and he's probably going to make a complete recovery. 2 other men, the plane's pilot and Kennedy's aide and close friend Edward Moss, died after the crash.
And I always remember the loss of my great friend, Ed Moss, and I always remember Birchby really saved my life. Dragged me out of that plane, risked going back to the plane because it could have caught on fire.
Oh, Mr. President.
My friend, I'm sure glad to hear your voice.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, you got a bad break, but my mother used to tell me that things like that develop character, and it'll make you stronger when you get older.
Well, I don't know. We'll be looking forward to getting back down.
Thank you. Give Joan a hug for me.
Certainly will, Mr. President.
My brother Bob had a great sense of compassion and a great sense of empathy. He was strongly committed to making the country a better country and the world a better world.
He'll make a speech if you don't look out.
Any of you from New York? Over the past few weeks, many leading members of the Democratic and the Liberal parties here in the state of New York have talked to me about being a candidate for the United States Senate. So if nominated by the Democratic State Convention, I shall resign from the cabinet to campaign for election. I shall devote all of my effort and all whatever talents that I possess to the state of New York. This I pledge.
During this election year of 1964, Senator Kennedy cannot visit us in our factories, in our shopping centers, or in our homes. But here from his hospital room, Senator Kennedy speaks to you now.
Well, I'm coming along now. The doctors estimate that I'll be out of the hospital around Christmas time. I'm planning on Thanksgiving. I haven't mentioned that to them yet, but I plan to in the next few days. I pledge to you my every effort to the citizens of Massachusetts and the people of the Commonwealth in the United States Senate in the years ahead.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce my 7th child, Robert Francis Kennedy.
I want to thank my mother for the kind introduction.
My mother was really what we call Honey Fitz's daughter. Honey Fitz, the great mayor of the city of Boston, and he was very close with my mother. And she had this sense of communication with people that was just extraordinary. And she was a terrific politician.
Major struggle between my younger brother and me during this campaign was where she was going to spend her time. Whether she's going to be here or in that other state to the north.
So I need your help and your support.
I need your help, and I need your support.
Vote for Edward M. Kennedy for United States Senator.
Let's put Robert Kennedy to work for New York.
But I think that we can make a difference.
CBS News coverage of election night continues. In the big Senate race in New York, Senator Kennedy, he will be Senator Kennedy-elect, won by 54% of the vote in New York. In Massachusetts, it was another sweep for the Kennedys. Senator Edward M. Kennedy ran up a victory of landslide proportions to join his brother Robert on the floor of the Senate.
I remember very well the wonderful pictures with my father when he was recuperating from a difficult heart condition, and I was recuperating from a plane crash. We had a wonderful opportunity to spend probably 6 weeks together every day, both of us recuperating back. It was a very touching and wonderful time.
Here's a senator from Massachusetts.
Really?
It was a lot of jostling as I looked up to my brother Bob, and then suddenly he was coming into a place where I had a little more seniority. I'd been around, although not very long, but I'd been around at least a few years, so it was kind of a role reversal.
It was probably the happiest time in terms of the service in the Senate.
Captain, where's your civilian affairs officer? Is he in there?
I went there in 1965 as the chairman of the Refugee Committee. After spending 7 or 8 days there, what struck me at that time was just the appalling destruction of life in the civilian population, the creation of massive refugees, and the loss of refugee and civilian life at that time. I come back deeply disturbed from Vietnam. My brother Bob and I were very much involved in the political debate and discussion, working with our colleagues to bring an end to the war.
Senator, are you and your brother Robert busy building a Kennedy wing of the Democratic Party?
Oh, not at all.
Aren't you establishing, both of you, a sort of an independent position of the president?
Well, let me say, particularly in response to the Vietnam issue, this is, I feel, a much too important question and issue for any kind of partisanship. We are spending $2 billion a month to defend the freedom of 14 million people in South Vietnam. Why shouldn't we make the same kind of effort for the 20 million people of the Negro race right here in America?
There's repeated speculation that your brother Robert will seek the Democratic presidential nomination.
And I don't think it's unpatriotic to find fault with the policies that we pursue in that part of the world.
I wanted him to be president. I thought it was enormously important that he be president. I wasn't convinced at that time that it was the wise decision to run. My concerns were that the opposition to the war was going to get personalized, and that something that he cared most about, which was the ending of the war, as well as attention to the problems of the cities, were going to be submerged. After he made that judgment and decision, of course, I went into the campaign with all my heart and soul.
I am announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
We've done great things. I think we are a compassionate nation.
The real constructive force in this world comes not from tanks or not from bombs, but from the imaginative ideas, the warm sympathies, and the generous spirit of a people.
No one can believe what has happened. It's been just a little over an hour since Dr. Martin Luther King died from an assassin's bullet.
Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort.
In this decade, we have lived through periods of more hate and violence than perhaps any other time in the history of our country. What has become of our land? What disease has affected us as a people? How many good men must we give?
Senator Robert F. Kennedy has been shot and wounded at his headquarters shortly after making a victory statement in the California primary.
Senator Kennedy died at 1:44 a.m. today. He was 42 years old.
From his parents and from his older brothers and sisters, Joe and Kathleen and Jack, he received an inspiration which he passed on to all of us. My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. To be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it. Those of us who loved him and who take him to his rest today pray that what he was to us and what he wished for others will someday come to pass for all the world. This has not been the first tragedy that has affected my parents or the members of our family, and we pray that it is the last. And each of us will have to decide in a private way, in our own hearts, in our own consciences, what we will do in the course of this summer and in future summers. And I know we'll choose wisely. For the last 10 weeks, I have not been active in public life. I have concerned myself with my family. I have spent much time by the sea, clearing my mind and my spirit of the events of last June. Some of you have suggested that for safety's sake and for my family's sake, I retire from public life. But there is no safety in hiding, not for me, nor for any of us here today. Like my three brothers before me, I pick up a fallen standard, sustained by their memory of our priceless years together. I shall try to carry forward that special commitment to justice, to excellence, to courage that distinguish their lives.
There is no safety in hiding, he said, for himself or anyone else. The party activists have not had the heart to talk politics to him, but they say among themselves he would be a formidable, if not unbeatable, candidate.
I was flattered by the interest, but it was a time of grieving myself and the family, and I just didn't think it was right to try and put the family through another campaign. And I don't believe I was set myself in terms of feeling the loss of my brother to have done it.
Mrs. Ethel Kennedy today gave birth to her 11th child, a girl.
6 months after the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy, who was 40 years old, now has 4 daughters and 7 sons. Both mother and infant are reported in excellent condition. Senator Edward Kennedy stayed with Mrs. Kennedy in the delivery and recovery rooms.
We want to say how happy we are today, and I told Ethel that I think Joan and I are going to take this baby home. We think Ethel has enough of them, so anyway.
I say to you, we will restore the strength of America. Sock it to him! Sock it to him!
Richard Milhouse Nixon will be the next president of the United States.
We have a new president. He has shown that he's an extremely hard and industrious worker. This morning he indicated that he wasn't going to use the Oval Room. My mother read that in the paper, and she called me up and said, Teddy, I see where the president isn't going to use the Oval Room. She said, I think someone ought to use it. We're looking into that.
In 1969, we had a Republican president, and it seemed important that we begin to have a loyal opposition. And to the extent that I could be a part of the leadership in the Senate, it seemed to be both an important opportunity as well as a responsibility, and one that I couldn't let go by.
A new Congress opened for business today in Washington. And opening day produced an important victory for Kennedy of Massachusetts. Democratic colleagues chose Edward Kennedy as Assistant Majority Leader in the Senate.
This opening day of the 91st Congress will most likely be remembered as the day Senator Edward Kennedy moved out of the long shadow of his 2 brothers and began to stake out his own future.
Senator Edward M. Kennedy drove a car off a narrow bridge on Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Kennedy survived, but a young woman in the car with him was drowned.
Mary Jo Kopechne, a former secretary to the late Robert Kennedy, Miss Kopechne drowned.
I made immediate and repeated effort to save Mary Jo by diving into the strong and murky current, but succeeded only in increasing my state of utter exhaustion and alarm. I was overcome by a jumble of emotions: grief, fear, doubt, exhaustion, panic, confusion, and shock. My conduct and conversations during the next several hours make no sense to me at all.
According to police, 8 hours elapsed from the time of the accident until he showed up at the police station to report it.
A spokesman for the senator said he might attend the funeral for Miss Kopechne tomorrow at Plymouth, Pennsylvania. A hearing of the charge against Senator Kennedy has been scheduled for next Monday.
Today, police moved to prosecute the senator on a charge of leaving the scene of an accident.
This morning I entered a plea of guilty to the charge of leaving the scene of an accident. I regard as indefensible the fact that I did not report the accident to the police immediately. These events, the publicity, innuendo, and whispers which have surrounded them, and my admission of guilt this morning raises the question in my mind of whether my standing among the people of my state has been so impaired that I should resign my seat in the United States Senate.
I've been impacted by a number of tragedies in my life. The loss of life of people, members of my family. Those were circumstances which I really didn't have control. I could feel the sense of regret and the sense of sadness and the sense of loss. But this was a circumstance from which I did have a responsibility. In that sense, it was quite different from other life's experience.
Senator Kennedy returned to the Senate for the first time since his automobile accident, and seldom has a return to work been marked by such public attention.
Kennedy said last night he had decided not to resign from the Senate.
I made the decision to continue in public life after the tragedy of Chappaquiddick. I'm a very different person than prior to that tragedy. The way that I'm a different person, I think, is probably reflected in my own view about sort of life and people and faith in God. And I'm a different person.
Senator, there is obviously a great price that one has to pay these days for political life, that some have to pay. Your brother John thought the price worth paying, so obviously did your brother Bobby, and so do you, it seems. But when you talk to your own two sons and to your nephews, do you encourage them to go into politics as your father did you? Is the price worth the paying?
Well, this generation is going to have to make up their own minds about what they're going to do. This 20-odd nieces and nephews of mine, their talents should be devoted towards not their own personal kinds of satisfactions, but towards helping and assisting others. That's really what Robert Kennedy would have wanted of his children, and President Kennedy would have wanted of his. And that can take a variety of different expressions. It doesn't take necessary that they run for any office, but it's that they devote themselves to the public good, and I think they'll do well.
So it is worth the pain.
Well, I suppose it is. On an occasion such as this, it's a pleasure to introduce my four strongest supporters, my wife Joan, Patrick Joseph Kennedy, Edward Moore Kennedy, and Carann Kennedy. And so with that basis of strength and support, I'm announcing my candidacy for re-election for the Senate of the United States from Massachusetts.
Say, the next president's not this one, but the next one coming up.
I think if there's been something that our family has learned over the period of time is that we don't make long-term plans. That's been an experience that we've had.
At a time when there are high government officials that are playing to the fears and frustrations of the people within our society, I want to be a voice of reconciliation, a voice that appeals to the best within people, within our country, and I return to the United States Senate for that purpose.
I'd like to get Teddy tape. That's why I want a lot more use of wiretapping. Suppose there's something that we can really hang Teddy or the Kennedy clan with. We're going to want to run with it. Maybe we can get a real scandal on it. Just looking for scandal or improprieties, now you're talking.
You heard about Wallace? It's quite serious.
Governor George Wallace of Alabama was shot and wounded today while campaigning in Laurel, Maryland. His press secretary says he is in critical condition.
He's got one bullet in the stomach and near the spine, and they think he will live. He may be paralyzed, he may not be, but be that as it may.
We've identified the fellow who had this gun and the assailant, apparently, as Arthur Herman Bremer.
Now, can we pin this on one of theirs? Sure. Look, let me play the game of Martha Jim. Just say it was the supporter of Kennedy. Now just put that out. Just say you have it on unmistakable evidence. There ought to be a record of it. Screw the record and put it out.
It was clear that this was an atmosphere and a climate in where the White House was politically taking no prisoners. They were infiltrating the movement.
Kennedy has written asking for Secret Service protection. You understand what the problem is. If the son of a bitch gets shot, let's say we didn't furnish it, so he gets buy his insurance and after the election, he doesn't get a goddamn thing and you get shot and shoot down at it. But I do it on the basis, though, that we pick the Secret Service back. You have anybody in the Secret Service that you can get to? You have anybody that you can rely on? Yeah, we got several. Plant 2 guys on it. This would be very useful.
Senator Kennedy, there's a thing today that I'd love to get your reaction to. It's just preposterous. They talk about it as the James Bond plot that took place in Washington the night where they found these people sneaking in to Democratic headquarters with eavesdropping devices, and one of them was a CIA man. I swear, when I heard first over the radio, I thought it was a prank of some kind on the local radio station. What diabolical information and secret could there be in there that they would have to go to all that risk and effort to get?
You know, the Democratic National Committee?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not so sure, but it does, and I don't think any of us really know exactly what they were up to, but this is enormously desperate kind of an attempt by this fellow was the head of security for the committee to re-elect the president, and I don't know really what. I don't know really what. I can't figure it out. Can you?
Good evening. The complicated, confusing, alarming story of espionage and eavesdropping that has come to be known as Watergate today came under the scrutiny of a committee of the United States Senate. Its purpose to get to the bottom of what threatens to become the worst scandal in the nation's political history.
I do know that there was extensive surveillance on Senator Kennedy, which I've testified to.
This for political purposes?
Yes, sir, it was.
Who else?
Senator Kennedy was the principal one where I would say the greatest amount of surveillance was conducted on Senator Kennedy, and subsequently politically embarrassing information was sought.
Was the FBI aware that this surveillance was for political purposes?
The FBI didn't perform this. This was performed directly by the White House.
I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Senator Edward Kennedy, his oldest son, Teddy Jr., 12 years old, had the lower portion of his right leg amputated because of bone cancer.
I had a son who had lost his leg to cancer. That was really one of the rare occasions that have been very close to deep in my heart and soul.
Teddy was so overwrought with the news. Imagine to tell your son he had his leg amputated. During the last 10 years, Teddy had had more tragedies than anyone, I think, in the world, starting with the loss of his brother in 1963. Up to 73, Teddy, my son, has had these tremendous crosses.
Of course, in the past few months, I've had the unfortunate situation of having my son affected by cancer as well. And, of course, what I want to see is the kind of very superior attention that he's received made available to all the other 12-year-olds.
I feel that I speak out on the issues, call them as I see them. I'm recognized as being a figure that people feel strongly about, but that's the kind of senator I want to be.
Today's march came 3 days before 18,000 public school children in Boston will board buses to begin the first stage of the school desegregation. Never before had a Kennedy been met with such a reception in Boston. He was booed. The crowd surged towards this once favorite son. As he walked towards the Federal Building, tomatoes and newspapers started flying, and the nonviolence stopped.
How do you explain that crowd's reaction to you?
I think their first concerns are really not with the issue of busing, but what's going to be at the other end of the bus.
No, but why did they react to you so violently?
Because, first of all, they have very deep concerns about the whole question of the desegregation plan here in the city of Boston. And I think that they're expressing their frustrations and their concerns.
It was the senator's first public appearance in Boston since he was roughly treated by an anti-school busing crowd 2 weeks ago, but Kennedy said that played no part in the decision, that it was for personal reasons he had come to this decision.
It has become quite apparent to me that I would be unable to make a full commitment to a campaign for the presidency. I simply cannot do that to my wife and children and other members of my family. Therefore, in 1976, I will not be a candidate for President or Vice President of the United States.
Jimmy Carter will be the next President of the United States.
Senator Kennedy's office. Can you hold a moment, please?
Maybe we could get Henry Royce and, 2 or 3 Republicans to put this in. I think it would be a great deal.
Inflation is a clear and present danger for this nation.
Everybody has to saddle up.
So we can't get everybody. Come on down here. Come on now. That's all right. Well, Brad, it's all right. Millions of our fellow citizens are out of work. We'll come to order. We have the agenda for us, the first issue.
Did you gather any impression about whether they were going to move at all on the immigration issue?
And it is wrong that women and minorities are denied their equal rights.
I will read this all tonight. It's all in here.
Cities are struggling against decay.
We're going to pursue this matter until the job gets done. The president at that time was not really challenging the country. And when he was talking about the malaise of the American people, that isn't the Democratic Party that I know.
We have been able to try and pass this health care for all Americans legislation.
I had a very fundamental difference with President Carter on the health care issue.
The next panelist, the distinguished senator from the state of Massachusetts, Edward Kennedy.
Thank you very much. Sometimes a party must sail against the wind. It is time for the Democratic Party to take up the cause of health. There probably has not been a family in this country that has been touched by sickness, illness, and disease like my own family. I had a father that was touched by stroke and sick for 7 years. We were able to get the very best in terms of health care because we were able to afford it. It would have bankrupted any average family in this nation. I've been able to receive it for myself and for my family. Just like all of us who are on the tip of the iceberg, way up high in the health care services. We've got the very best, all of us at the tip of the iceberg. But I want every delegate at this convention to understand that as long as I'm a vote, and as long as I have a voice in the United States Senate, it's going to be for that Democratic platform plank that provides decent quality of health care, north and south, east and west, for all Americans as a matter of right and not a privilege.
His publicity has been almost fawning, and his standing in public opinion polls high. With President Carter's standing at dismal and going down, with inflation going up, Kennedy for president became possible.
Let's say personal considerations. Have you promised your mother that you won't run for the presidency while she's still alive?
I didn't promise her that I wouldn't run while she was alive, but my mother has indicated that she would support any decision that I would make in the future.
Would your wife's well-being, in terms of her efforts to deal with her problems, be a factor in making you not run?
Joan has courageously stated, has had a battle with alcoholism, and I admire her and respect her for the forthrightness in which she's faced this issue and for the efforts that she's making.
There's some people who ask whether or not you're enjoying this role that you have, that in a sense you're playing cat and mouse with the president. Are you doing that?
Not really. I've stated my areas of difference with the president. and I'll continue to do that.
The growing political friction between President Carter and Senator Kennedy became a bit more lively today. Two congressmen, William Broadhead and Thomas Downey, have reported that during a dinner conversation with the president earlier this week, they twice were startled when they heard the president say, quote, "If Kennedy runs, I'll whip his ass."
I'd like to ask you very directly, if I may, in response to the president's declaration that he will whip your ass, if you think he will.
No.
Today, I formally announce that I'm a candidate for President of the United States.
I could not have lived with myself if I had stayed on the sidelines and been silent. I could not have lived with myself.
What's up? Very much. Nice to see you. Thank you.
How are you?
Thank you very much.
Very good.
How are you? How are you? Nice
You are as handsome
Well,
as
it's
your
nice
brother.
to see you. Thanks a lot. Help us out now.
I will.
Give us a little hand. We need a little...
Enough of high unemployment and enough of Jimmy Carter.
I don't think I come as a candidate with all the answers, but I come as, I think, probably over a lifetime that's been tested by a variety of different both challenges, tragedies, and also some successes.
And some failures.
And some failures.
On the day after the Southern primaries, Kennedy was much more upset by a newspaper article than any defeat. A front-page Chappaquiddick story in the New York Times that came up with almost nothing new on his actions there. Kennedy was the angriest reporters have seen him in this campaign.
There has been no family in the time that I have been in public life that has been investigated, whose personal lives have been investigated as much as my life, the life of my wife, my children. I'm not interested in the personal lives of other candidates for the presidency.
Yesterday's polls show him trailing President Carter for the first time. Kennedy attributed his decline to Carter's high visibility during the Iranian crisis.
Since this Iranian situation's come up, President Carter's ratings has went up in the polls. Now we still have inflation, talk of depression, high energy cost. The people are still hostages. So what has he done?
I'm sure I'll think of something on that, but
I want to thank you very much for coming out here this afternoon. Thanks an awful lot.
Kennedy for president.
Ana Victoria!
Vota por Kennedy para presidente. Let's fight back.
With the presidential nomination underway, Kennedy's side says it still does not have the votes to win. Kennedy's decision to withdraw from the race for president, when it came quickly.
for me, a few hours ago, this campaign came to an end. I congratulate President Carter on his victory here. For all those whose cares have been our concern, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die.
I ran for president and lost. I wanted to be president. That was not in the cards. And that was certainly not a pleasant experience.
For the members of my family, the 1980 campaign was a difficult experience. I am involved in a divorce. It's a painful experience, both for Joan and myself and for the members of my family.
I'm going to be active in terms of party affairs, active in terms of the discussions and the debate. By disposition, nature, and desire, I'm an activist.
I will not rest or retreat until our nation at long last holds this truth to be self-evident, that not only all men, but all people are created equal.
You don't have to be president to make a difference. All you have to do is care and be involved.
If the government cannot control nuclear arms, then people will change the government. Ronald Reagan must love poor people because he's creating so many more of them.
The bride arrived with her uncle, Senator Edward Kennedy. He particularly looked pleased and proud at the opportunity to give away his niece.
It was touching in so many different ways. Her gown had little shamrocks on it. That was something that I think, her father would have been very, very touched by her and would have been very proud of her.
I want to read you something that Jackie Kennedy wrote in a thank you note after you gave Caroline away. On you, the carefree youngest brother, fell a burden a hero would beg to be spared. Everyone is going to make it because you are always there with your love. Jackie.
It's about as nice as you can get.
And here's one of my pretty sisters, Eunice. And here's another pretty sister, Pat.
I grew up in a family in which public service was thought to be a noble profession, in which individuals should be very much involved in what Oliver Wendell Holmes called the actions and passions of our times. And it hasn't just been the brothers that were involved. My sister Eunice, in starting the Special Olympic program, has provided a program that has brought enormous joy to the mentally retarded and to their families. And my sister Jean, with the Arts for the Handicapped, has done likewise. My sister Pat has been equally active. That's been a family tradition.
Okay, all right, let's go. Okay, we got it, gang. Chuck, okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
I'm one voice and I'm one vote. But people are entitled to know what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it. That's what this whole process is about.
In Robert Bork's America, there is no room at the inn for blacks and no place in the Constitution for women. And in our America, there should be no seat on the Supreme Court for Robert Bork. And I urge the committee and the Senate to reject the nomination of Mr. Bork.
So the vote, 58-42 against Robert Bork, his nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court has been defeated.
I want to sign a civil rights bill. I will not sign a quota bill.
Quotas, schmotas. Quotas are not the issue. Job discrimination is the issue.
Senator Edward Kennedy said eloquently, quotas schmotas, and he predicts a veto would be overridden.
It's time to end the double standard that denies equal opportunity to women and minorities. No ifs, ands, or buts, and no watered-down compromises either. President Bush is preparing to take this country unilaterally into war in the Persian Gulf without the approval of Congress and without the support of the American people.
Police in Palm Beach, Florida say late today, that a nephew of Senator Edward Kennedy is a suspect in an alleged rape.
Police say the senator, who was also staying at the compound over Easter, failed to respond to initial inquiries about what happened the night of the alleged rape.
Edward Kennedy came to court today and talked of an emotional Good Friday conversation with his sister Jean about the death of her husband, defendant William Smith's father. Then, unable to sleep, Kennedy said he invited his son Patrick and William to go out.
We went to Obar. I wish I'd gone for a long walk on the beach instead, but we did go to Obar.
In the halls of Congress, he is somewhat damaged.
Kennedy also brushed off a suggestion from fellow Senator Orrin Hatch that he quit drinking.
With so much controversy about his own private life and facing a tough re-election fight, the senator appeared at the John F. Kennedy School at Harvard today and admitted some personal faults.
I'm painfully aware that the criticism directed at me in recent months involves far more than honest disagreement with my positions or the usual criticisms from the far right. It also involves the disappointment of friends and many others who rely on me to fight the good fight. To them I say I recognize my own shortcomings, the faults in the conduct of my private life. I realize that I alone am responsible for them, and I am the one who must confront them.
Well, I'm gratified by the verdict of the jury in Palm Beach. I had always believed that when all the facts were in, that Will would be found innocent. And I suppose if there's anything good that has come out of this long experience, the renewed closeness of our family and our friends.
I'm basically a hopeful and optimistic person. And I believe deeply in hope. I believe in love, the power of love.
You've changed. What happened?
Vicky entered my life.
I never thought I was going to get married. I don't think I was ever really prepared to think in those terms again. And Vicky really awakened these feelings, emotions that I think have really been banked in my life, and that I didn't really think probably existed there anymore. So it's been a very extraordinary reawakening and a wonderful, wonderful time in my life. Our lives.
You're on the campaign trail full-time now?
Absolutely, all the time. Vicky is as well. Not here today. She's busy in other places. She's been a great asset.
Heading for Massachusetts.
It's a very uplifting time for me.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much. Good to see you. How are you? Did you think so? Did you think so?
Feels good. We're getting a good response, and we're going to win it.
I said when I first ran for the Senate that what the Senate needed was a young person with new ideas. Now I say there's nothing like age and experience. I don't think I'm too old to be your United States Senator, do you? I need your help. I need your vote. I need that help and assistance. Will we get it?
Thank you.
I may not be the youngest. Eventually I'll be the thinnest, but I'm going to be the fightingest candidate, and you have a hand in that part. And I won't let you down. I won't let you down. I won't let you down, Massachusetts. Thank you. Mother knew this day was coming, but she did not dread it. She accepted and even welcomed it, not as a leaving, but as a returning. She has gone to God, and she is home, and at this moment, she is happily presiding at a heavenly table with both of her Joes, with Jack and Kathleen, with Bobby and David. She will be there, ready to welcome the rest of us home someday. Of this I have no doubt. Whatever any of us has done, whatever contribution we have made, begins and ends with Rose and Joseph Kennedy. For all of us, Dad was the spark, Mother was the light of our lives. He was our greatest fan, she was our greatest teacher.
While Senator Edward Kennedy is the lone remaining political patriarch of his time, carrying the liberal Democratic mantle for Massachusetts for 35 years, there is a whole second generation of Kennedys who have followed in the footsteps of John, Bobby, and Teddy.
I owe a special debt to the man his nephews and nieces call Teddy.
I'm so proud to introduce my father, the senior...
In our family, he's never missed a First Communion, a graduation, or a chance to walk one of his nieces down the aisle.
There were 9 of us, 30 in the next generation, and 100 in the next generation. I'm immensely proud of the way that all of them have accepted the challenges of life, and I think are making important, useful contributions. I think their fathers would be very proud of them, as I am. I love them all.
How are you glad to see old Kennedy? Are you glad to see me?
I never looked at it really in terms of the questions of legacy. I think I've always wanted to try and be a better person.
I have worked hard for schools that teach
I've always
and health care that heals.
perceived my role as to try to get some things done.
It's time for Americans to lift their voices now in pride for our immigrant past and in pride for our immigrant future. You hear that? We are excluded from having an opportunity to debate this because of the power of the insurance industry. The New Deal, the New Frontier, and the Great Society are not the end of American social history. Make that argument on the floor of the United States Senate. Our day will come again, and we must keep the faith until it dawns. The issue, we'll be back to fight and fight and fight again. We ought to hear at least what the reality is that the American people ought to understand, that the parents of those servicemen ought to understand what their children are going to be faced with. Whether the odds are in my favor or against me, I will continue to stand up for the people who sent me to the Senate in the first place.
Our troops deserve better, Mr. Secretary. I think American people deserve better. They deserve competency and they deserve the facts. In baseball, it's 3 strikes, you're out. What is it for the Secretary of Defense?
Well, that is quite a statement.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm proud to stand with them here today and offer my help, offer my voice, offer my energy, my commitment to make Barack Obama the next president of the United States.
I stand here today with a great deal of humility. I know what your support means. I know the cherished place the Kennedy family holds in the hearts of the American people. And that is as it should be, because the Kennedy family, more than any other, has always stood for what's best about the Democratic Party and what is best about America. In the year I was born, hold on a second. In the year I was born, President Kennedy let out word that the torch had been passed to a new generation of Americans. He was right, it had. It was passed to his youngest brother. From the battles of the 1960s to the battles of today, he has carried that torch, lighting the way for all who share his American ideals. It's a torch he's carried as the Lion of the Senate. So to have this man stand beside me today is more than just politics for me. It is personal.
In the first pictures released since his diagnosis, Senator Ted Kennedy is joined by his wife Vicki at Massachusetts General Hospital as the family comes together to discuss his treatment.
Just a few minutes ago, Massachusetts General Hospital issued a statement saying that after a series of tests, doctors have discovered a brain tumor, a cancerous brain tumor.
Kennedy's colleagues struggled to absorb the news about their friend, the third longest serving senator in American history.
Ted, my dear friend, I love you.
He's a strong guy and has great heart, and we're confident he's going to be back here.
Kennedy's wife said the senator is making her crazy by insisting he's going to take part in a sailing race off Cape Cod this weekend.
In the end, Kennedy would steer his boat to a second-place finish in his class.
Couldn't be a more beautiful day. We had wonderful friends, family, and it's a great tradition out here. We always enjoy it. I think we were ended up in the front part of the fleet.
We won. Let them disprove it.
Overnight, a message from Kennedy's wife Vicki to friends said in part, "I want you to know that Teddy is in fighting form and ready to take this on."
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good. Nothing is going to keep me away from this special gathering tonight. I have come here tonight to stand with you to elect Barack Obama President of the United States. The torch will be passed again to a new generation of Americans, and I pledge to you that I will be there next January on the floor of the United States Senate when we begin the great change to a better country. So with Barack Obama, and for you, and for me, the work begins anew. The hope rises again, and the dream lives on.